Hey, it's Emily, and welcome to the Edge Student Podcast. Your questions answered by James and Daniel.
Hey, students, welcome to the Edge Podcast. This is the questions edition. I'm James.
This is Daniel, here with you guys today. Excited to bring another question to you.
All right, Daniel, we're going to get rolling. So today our question is from Deondre Crudup, and here's what Deondre asks. He says, how did people get to heaven before Jesus was on earth?
That's a great question. These are the types of questions that I usually let James answer, and then I kind of just add where I feel, it needs to be added. First thing that comes to my mind is what Jesus said to the other man on the cross with him in that moment, today you'll be with me in paradise. And, some people have led to think that, that there was a holding place called paradise, and that's where people were before, the resurrection. And then once the resurrection happened, that they would go to heaven. And I mean, I may be totally butchering this, but, that's where I've been led to start and kind of, ask myself the same question and kind of learn these things along with you guys. And no greater teacher than James to kind of talk about the apologetics and those types of things concerning these types of questions.
Yeah, so we start out with a real easy one, DeAndre. Thank you. So, Greg, really good question. That's a stalling tactic, by the way, when you're trying to figure out what to say. No, but seriously, there's a parable that Jesus tells, and it's a parable of the rich man and Lazarus. And it's funny that the rich man's name's left out, but Lazarus' name is mentioned, and he was a beggar that sat at the rich man's gate. In that story, it says that one day that beggar, Lazarus, he died, and sometime also the rich man died. And they both found themselves in a place. Lazarus found himself, the beggar, he found himself in a place called Abraham's bosom. And the rich man found himself not in Abraham's bosom, but in a place that was separated from Abraham's bosom. In the parable, Jesus talks about where the rich man was in torment. The rich man was uncomfortable. He was thirsty. It was hot, and painful. And for Lazarus, he was in comfort. And at one point in the parable, Jesus says that the rich man called over to Lazarus and said, "Hey," or actually calls over and says, calls over to Abraham. And says, "Abraham, would you tell Lazarus to get me a drink of water to help my thirst, to alleviate my thirst?" And the thing that sticks out there, and DeAndre will get to the kind of the final part, but the thing that sticks out there is, think of the arrogance of the rich man. Here he is, definitely in a place of torture and seems like punishment, right? And still he thinks that he's over Lazarus. Right. He thinks he's greater than this beggar. He's calling this beggar to serve him, and even there, the depravity, the kind of just messed upness that's there is just you're just thinking, geesh. But so there seems to be, and whether this was just used as kind of to teach a lesson or not, but a lot of scholars believe that that Abraham's bosom really exists and existed, that it was this holding place, until Jesus would die. Right. And that is the place that is mentioned when Jesus was buried, that he descended. And he went to this holding place, and he took those who were on which is called Abraham's side, those who would believe in him by faith, those who followed would be the Old Testament, Jehovah God, right, God the Father, those who followed him in the Old Testament by faith, right, put their trust in God Jehovah, not their works, that they went to this Abraham's bosom.
I got you.
And so when Jesus finally, kind of like it's taught that they were there on credit. Okay, yeah. So they were there kind of on credit because they believed, and Jesus would ultimately pay for their sins. That they were kind of there on credit, and that when Jesus came and descended and took them, that he took them up to eternity, took them to heaven. Yeah, paid the debt, and said, "Hey, it's paid now, so I can take you from Abraham's bosom, where there wasn't pain and torture, but now you can enter eternal life." And like you said, it was when he turned to the thief on the cross, and he said, "Today you'll be with me where? In paradise." Yeah. So some believe that paradise in that moment was Abraham's bosom, and then he would enter eternity, heaven. So that's kind of where it is. Some scholars debate on that. DeAndre, all I can tell you is Google it. All right, just Google that if you're not satisfied with that. Just Google it. But that's where people supposedly, and that's our best shot at it. Supposedly went to heaven before Jesus was on earth.
Yeah, and it's we like to have black and white answers with some of these questions, but I think often, from a question like that stems, even greater questions, Am I ready for heaven? Am I ready to, to be welcomed into Abraham's bosom? I think it's more about the preparedness sometimes than it is the final resting place. I mean, because if I haven't done what it takes to be prepared, if I haven't made a decision to follow Christ with my life and surrendering my life over to Him, man, then that question kind of goes out the window anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's what Jesus was really meaning in that parable. To say, are you ready? Are you ready? There is a place. There is a consequence, an eternal consequence. And and so that was at the heart of what he was getting at. So cool.
Absolutely. Thanks, Deondre.
Thanks, buddy.
Question this week.
Yep. Send us your questions. We'll do our best to answer them.
We hope you were encouraged by today's podcast, and don't forget to text your questions to 304-713-2104. Be blessed.